Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about two soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games they come from without getting too bogged down in music theory. Joe, what are this week's games?
Up first is 2012's Journey, the beautiful and emotional adventure from the sand dunes of a desert to the top of a mountain, where you may find yourself joined by some unexpected companions.
Following that is the return to the Aperture Science facility, where you'll dig into the center's secret past, while also using gels that have a variety of effects. 2011's Portal 2. Oh, finally with these two games, finally talking about Journey and Portal 2. The theme for them, though? They are PS3 surprises. I don't think anyone expected Journey to have the resonance in the industry that it did, but also no one expected Portal 2, a Valve game, on the oft-maligned by Gabe Newell PlayStation 3.
Did it even come out on the 360?
It did, but I mean, all the headlines were the PS3 announcement at E3. I mean, that was the big deal, but yeah, it was on everything. Joe, how you doing? What are you playing?
I am not actually playing a lot recently. I have been actually very busy doing cross stitches for Christmas gifts because I started a little late on that. Whoops. So I've mainly just been playing a little bit of Age of Calamity. That's basically all. It's been a very light week for gameplay.
How far do you think you are in that?
Oh, I'm still in chapter 2.
Okay.
I'm nowhere.
I still have yet to play it, so I'm really interested to get to it eventually. It's on the Christmas list. We'll see what happens with that. I am 30 hours into Assassin's Creed Valhalla, so made a bit more progress in that this week. All these areas have weird names. It's like Scollopshire or whatever that I'm about to go into next. It's this area with the power level in-game of 130, and I think end-game is like 250, 280, so I'm kind of, I think, at the halfway point if I had to guess as far as main story goes. But yeah, wow, that's a beefy game for sure.
The only thing that I know about Assassin's Creed Valhalla is watching the VTuber Corone play it.
Is she? All right.
Where she, I think she played Syndicate 2, and that's how she got really into it. But like when she kills somebody, she just screams "Assassin" every single time. And there's also a clip of her walking up to a guy that's dressed like Santa, essentially, and accidentally killing him. And she breaks character for like a full minute of like, "Oh, I messed up. Oh, I messed up."
That sounds amazing. I might have to check that out. Just, oh gosh, those Assassin's Creed games are hitting me hard this year, and I love it. Some of my favorites, for sure. Well, let's talk about some composer follow-up news as we're wrapping up 2020 soon. These composers in the industry that we've talked about on this show, they're still doing great things. They're still putting in the work. We've got to talk about Songs of Supergiant. Their 10th anniversary album is now available on digital platforms and storefronts. Wouldn't surprise me. This was the concert that you went to at one of the PAXs, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I have already listened to the album, and it is exactly that.
Oh, perfect. So it's almost like, in a way, if you wanted to recreate that experience for yourself, or if people who happen to miss out, to check that out. I mean, that sounds really, really cool.
It is a fantastic album. I think the cover of We All Become, which is the opener of the whole thing, oh, it's so good. And the Bastion medley that ends it,
sounds amazing.
In other news, Valhalla, the cyberpunk bartender action that I talked about many moons ago, is on Game Pass now. Now, it should be noted, currently, at least at time of recording, there is a bug that causes the game to crash. I think when you start a new game, Eastbird Games, who are the publishers of the game, say that they already have it fixed and the patch is just awaiting certification. By the time you hear this, it'll probably have gone through already. So if you are interested in Valhalla, you can go check it out on Game Pass now. But unfortunately, this news also came alongside the fact that the sequel, Nirvana, has been delayed indefinitely. Not canceled, but it no longer has a release date. They stated it was mostly because they kind of had to just start over and a bunch of other factors. So here's hoping that we see it sometime next year, but it doesn't sound likely.
News broke this week that Persona 5 Strikers, or what was known in Japan as Persona 5 Scramble the Phantom Strikers, it's the Persona 5 Musou, the Dynasty Warriors, like what Hyrule Warriors is like, but going to be Persona 5 themed. Persona 5 Strikers is launching in the West on February 23rd, 2021 on PlayStation 4, Switch, and PC. That was a new addition there, but it makes sense with Sega and how they're expanding games to PC. It should be noted that a lot of people thought, oh, this was going to be announced at the Game Awards, which are this Thursday, a couple days from this episode's release, and it happened to slip on YouTube and surprise leak. Let's talk about those Game Awards quickly, though. Animal Crossing New Horizons, Doom Eternal, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Ghost of Tsushima, Hades, and The Last of Us Part 2. Joe, what wins Game of the Year?
If I'm saying like what I think is the correct option, it's Hades, but the smart prediction is probably Last of Us.
Yeah, the internet may not want to hear it, but it's not going to be the popular choice, but the critical choice is The Last of Us Part 2. That is going to be what wins Game of the Year. Get ready now, internet haters. I love that game. That may be my Game of the Year as well. I'm just saying. Also, plenty of reveals generally happen at Jeff Keighley's The Game Awards. Do you think that a Super Smash Bros. Character gets revealed at the Game Awards?
I think there's a higher than average chance, but also I do want to warn everybody listening. Remember, we have been promised nothing. And if there is not a Smash reveal, don't get angry that there was no Smash reveal. But I think if they're going to announce one anyway, it's been a very scant year because of COVID. But if there's going to be any year that they bring another Smash reveal to the Game Awards, it could be this. Then again, Byleth was revealed 2-3 weeks after the Game Awards last year.
Yeah.
So who knows?
Yeah, I think it's always interesting to see the random 4chan rumors that pop up, whether it's Crash Bandicoot, it's Sora, it's Jonesy from Fortnite, it's Doomslayer. It could be any of them, it could be all of them, it could be none of them, but I think you're right. A higher than average chance, but I'm not going to get my hopes up for it. Should be a fun show, regardless. It's crazy to think we're already at the end of the year.
Meanwhile, the first 2 episodes of the Detention Netflix series are available now. There are 8 expected total episodes coming. They're rolling out to coincide with the Taiwanese broadcast. I have not watched it yet. I might wait for the whole thing to be out. I don't know. Then again, I don't know if I'm going to be able to binge something that's subtitled like that, but we'll see. I'm very much looking forward to giving it a shot.
Yeah, we mentioned that on the Detention episode that it was coming, and it's just good to see that finally out.
So, we got to get into the meat of this thing. We got to talk about Journey. How long have we been waiting to talk about Journey? A long time.
Ever since we mentioned Austin Wintory on the show as a composer.
Yeah, so Journey is a game I believe to be close to both of our hearts. I think I'm safe to say that. And I'm super pumped to talk about it. Let's do it. So Journey was originally released for the PlayStation 3 on March 13th, 2012. A PS4 release happened on July 21st, 2015. And then a PC release happened on June 6th, 2019. And an iOS release on August 6th, 2019. I think I had forgotten that it had come out on iOS.
Me too, honestly.
That's a little weird, but hey, good for them. It was developed by That Game Company, that all one word, and Santa Monica Studio, and it was published by Sony Computer Entertainment, but on PC and iOS it was published by Annapurna Interactive, who does God's work. So, Journey is a very simple game. You are put in control of a figure that is donning a red robe with yellow trim, with your journey beginning in a vast desert. The only real landmark that you have to base off where you're going from is a mountain, on top of which there is a shining light, and that mountain just happens to be where your pilgrimage is leading. It is purposely a beat-by-beat retelling of Joseph Campbell's monomyth theory, which you might know more accurately as the hero's journey, which most stories are like adaptations of. That's why it's called the monomyth.
I mean, Star Wars is a prime example of that. If you take any screenwriting class or have any interest in narratives, you know what the hero's journey is. It's the foundation of storytelling, honestly. You have the hero, there's a call to action, whether, something is taking them out of their element. They go on a journey, they encounter struggles along the way. There's the climax, there's the denouement, all of that.
So there are very few controls in Journey. You can jump, and holding the jump button allows you to fly temporarily. How long and high up you can fly depends on the length of the flowing scarf that is coming off of your character's neck. The scarf gets longer and longer as you progress, though certain things can cause your scarf to shorten again. You can also press a button to emote. That's like the best word I can use to describe it. You hit it and your character releases a chime sound, and the longer you hold down the button, the louder and stronger the sound is. This chime can also emit a short wave off of your body, which can activate certain things in the world, but it actually has a more common use as well. For you see, on your adventure, you may find yourself meeting other travelers in a similar garb to your own, and perhaps they'll stick around you and act as a guide, or maybe they will fall behind, and perhaps they might leave you behind because you're being super slow. And the only way to communicate with them is through these chimes. And at the end of the game, the big twist of Journey is revealed in what at the time was a really pretty unique feature. Each of those other travelers that you encountered were actually another player somewhere in the world who was also playing Journey at the same time. So Journey is a secret multiplayer experience. And it blew people's minds back in the day. So, with your comrades throughout the sands, can you complete your pilgrimage and make it to the mountaintop? And what will you learn about the history of this land along the way in a completely 100% wordless story? So, Peter, here's where I will ask you, what are our experiences with Journey?
Journey is a game that I love. And it's a game that certainly became very famous for its soundtrack, as you'll get into. But it's also a game I've played once. And despite owning it on the PS4 version and all that, I mean, I played it pretty close to launch on PS3. And I had a great experience with it. I happened to have one player stick with the majority of my experience. I think there were a couple others that dropped in and out, maybe at the beginning, maybe at the ending or whatever. But I think I unlocked, there's a trophy where you have one player stick with you the majority of the way. And so I got that. And that was powerful. They definitely helped act as a guide. And yeah, you do communicate through those chimes. And yeah, it's a magical experience if you hit it at the right time and there's an audience for it and you have that kind of connection with another person across the world. Again, wordless with chimes. I mean, wow. And that Austin Wintory score, it's a magical game. But I would be hesitant to return to it because I feel like that one playthrough was just like, I'll treasure that forever.
I have played Journey several times in my life, at least 5 or 6. I go back to it every once in a while. I think there was a day in 2016 where a bunch of people were like, hey, the PS3 version of Journey seems a little lonely right now. What if we all jumped in and played Journey for a day?
Oh man, that's awesome.
And it was very fun. I got to play a part in that, and it was great. And yeah, the score of this game is amazing. It is one of the prettiest games I've ever seen, even still.
Yeah.
Oh man, that sand is so good looking.
The famous shot where you're going in the temple and there's the windows essentially, and then the lights cutting through it as you're going through the pillars, and the sand is glowing. It's a famous shot from the game. But wow, it's amazing.
It's so pretty. I absolutely adore Journey. It is on my list of like some of my favorite games ever made. And if you have not played Journey, you kind of owe it to yourself to give it a shot. It's not a long game.
Oh no.
It's like 2, maybe 3 hours max. I'm pretty sure I can beat it in 1. It's very good though. It's well worth your time. And it has a surprisingly rocky development story, like crazy rocky actually. So development on Journey actually began during a time when that game company was nearing the end of a 3-game contract with Sony Computer Entertainment, with their previous titles Flow and Flower also being a part of said contract. That's why it was published by Sony. That's why it was a PS3, PS4 exclusive, etc., etc. And apparently part of this deal was that Sony had expected that game company to complete development on Journey within 1 year, something that the then 7-person team behind the game knew was kind of an unreasonably short amount of time. Games take a long time to make, folks. Just be aware, remember. Like I said, Journey's development was very rocky. When development was taking longer than anticipated, Sony agreed to a year extension, during which the team was actually struggling with maintaining good communication as well as with paring down their ideas for the project. Like, they just had too many ideas. There was too much they wanted to do. And then the end of that year happened, the end of the second year, and the team realized that the game they had, quote, did not spark the emotions in the player that the team had wanted. And so they cautiously asked Sony for another year extension. And Sony agreed, but then development lasted even longer than that extension. So in total, development of Journey lasted over 3 years, when Sony had originally contracted them to make a game in 1. And for these reasons, the team was crazy stressed, even though it had grown from 7 people to 18, so there were more hands on deck at the time. But arguments in the team started erupting when, like, the money was drying up and time was running out, and Sony, as Austin Wintory puts it, Sony said, the game has to effing come out. So director Genova Chen says that the company had actually been driven into complete bankruptcy during the final months of the project, and most of the devs went unpaid in those few months. So it's a miracle this game came out. Wow. So their goal with Journey was to make the player feel small, as if they were an inconsequential part of this wider world, and they wanted to inspire a sense of awe at their surroundings. They wanted to make a game that moved past the win, kill, defeat mentality, and actually encouraged people to work together. In fact, the initial prototype for Journey was a game where you helped distract dragons in order to allow other players to pass by them safely. But this idea was scrapped when the team realized that most players would just sort of ignore the other players and move on with their own personal goals. So they kept the multiplayer concept, but they wanted a game that encouraged cooperation while not allowing competition. And they figured that allowing the player to build a connection with others without the need for voice chat or fighting was something that they really wanted to aim for. The game purposely does not display usernames during the adventure because they felt that it, quote, would allow players' biases and preconceptions to come between them and the other player. So again, that's why it was so shocking to a lot of people that, like, oh wait, those were players, not like AI, because it doesn't tell you that until after the credits roll.
And sometimes, I mean, I don't know if you're going to get to this, but I feel it's important to note that, like, it's really interesting to learn that you don't see the screen names, because you're absolutely right. I think biases would come into play, but sometimes these players would have white cloaks. And so players may wonder, like, I wonder what that means. Or they may look just exactly like you, and you feel a kind of camaraderie there. But the white would kind of symbolize like a higher elevation of knowledge.
The white cloaks, I believe you have to beat the game like 10 times before you get a white cloak. I don't remember the details.
Interesting.
You have to clear the game a certain amount of times before you can get a white cloak.
I see.
So the people that have white cloaks have played Journey a lot, if you see one of them. I've only ever encountered one white cloak in all of my playthroughs, and I don't have a white cloak.
But yeah, it just goes to show that, there can be other variances in the players that you encounter.
Mm-hmm. Another concept they used during design was that they worked on it with the mentality of tending to a Japanese garden, which they explained meant that they were removing any game elements that did not fit with the others in order to make sure that nothing got in the way of the emotions that they wanted to convey. And this also had the added benefit of giving the player freedom to explore while also knowing exactly where their goal was, no matter what. For most of the game, you can basically always see the mountain, except for some parts where you're underground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go to the mountain.
Yeah, and you're always moving closer to the mountain, always. In terms of aesthetic, there are clear inspirations from the Middle East, including Arabic architecture and art, but there is also some inspiration drawn from Genova Chen's childhood. He grew up in China, namely things based on Chinese and Tibetan influences, specifically. And according to Chen, 25 testers had cried upon finishing the game. That adds nothing to the development story, but I felt like I had to bring it up.
Also, not surprising, though. It's a beautiful game. It's a beautiful ending.
Mm-hmm. So upon release, Journey was a critical darling. It currently sits at a 92 on Metacritic. Most praise focuses on the soundtrack as well as the visuals, not to mention the emotional impact of the narrative. It became the fastest selling game on the PS Store in both North America and Europe, basically right after it released. And it was an awards darling in 2012 and 2013. At DICE, it won 8 awards, which was the most of that night. It won Game of the Year, Outstanding Innovation in Gaming, Casual Game of the Year, Art Direction, Online Gameplay, Original Music Composition, and Sound Design, and it was also nominated for 3 other awards, being Downloadable Game of the Year, Gameplay Engineering, and Story. IGN and GameStop called it the best game of the year, with many other outlets joining them and saying the same. It won 5 BAFTAs, being Artistic Achievement, Audio Achievement, Game Design, Online Multiplayer, and Original Music. It was nominated at the BAFTAs for Best Game, Game Innovation, and Story. It won 6 GDC awards, being Best Audio, Best Game Design, Best Visual Arts, Best Downloadable Game, the Innovation Award, and Game of the Year. And those are just the big ones. We'll be here all day if I try to list all the awards Journey won. They cleaned house for most of that year.
It was either that or Telltale's The Walking Dead, for narrative and character performance and all things like that. So those were the big games in 2012 for sure.
That game company would go on to make another game afterwards that released last year in 2019, being Sky Children of Light for Android and iOS. A Switch port has been confirmed of that game, but it currently only has a release window of 2021. So, we have already talked about Austin Wintory. You brought him to episode 10 for his work on Assassin's Creed Syndicate. So for Journey, we're going to cover the cellist who plays a huge part in Journey's soundtrack. Her name is Tina Guo. She was born October 1985 in Shanghai, China. Her father was a concert cellist and her mother was a concert violinist, and they are also both the artistic directors of the California International Music and Arts Festival, which is an event held in San Diego. So basically, she was locked in from minute one. She began learning piano at age 3 and began learning violin from her mother at age 5, and then she began learning cello from her father at age 7. Her parents were also apparently very strict with practicing. She says that she was forced to practice 6 to 8 hours a day.
How do you not get burned out after that?
That's like your entire day is just play music and then eat and then go to sleep and get up and repeat. That's nuts. I can't imagine doing anything for 6 to 8 hours a day unless I'm getting paid for it. At age 10, she joined the Civic Youth Orchestra, and then after high school, she attended USC Thornton School of Music with a full-ride scholarship to study the cello. While there, she began to date a guitarist for an 80s-style classic metal band. And after attending one of their shows, she began wanting to try adapting her cello performances to the style of heavy metal. Specifically, she wanted to find a technique that would allow her to play the cello in a way that made it sound like a guitar. And according to her, it took a lot of effort and a lot of failed YouTube videos before she did finally get a sound that she was happy with. And it sounds awesome. In her junior year, Guo dropped out of college, a decision that her parents were very much not happy with. But she did so because she didn't feel like she could balance both performing and attending her classes, and she went for the performing angle. And it worked out because she has performed alongside artists such as the Foo Fighters at the 2008 Grammys. She toured with Cirque du Soleil. She's performed with Hans Zimmer. She has played with a lot of people and done a lot of things. And again, we'd actually be here all day if I tried to list it all. Two of her songs, called Queen Bee and Forbidden City, were featured as downloadable songs for Rock Band. And she did a cover of the God of War theme in collaboration with game composer Inon Zur in 2018. I read that and was like, wait, does that mean she was on the soundtrack for God of War 2018? No, it was just she was just doing a cover of the original God of War theme. She is an official ambassador for Music Traveler, which, as far as I can tell, is just like a group that is dedicated to helping tours, maybe? I couldn't find what it actually was. The website was remarkably unhelpful. But this is a title that she shares with people like Billy Joel, Hans Zimmer, Adrian Brody, Sean Lennon, and many others. No, I didn't misspeak. John Lennon's son's name is Sean Lennon. I learned this for the first time too. I'm mad about it. Now, and one quote that she has on her official website that I found really good was actually from Hans Zimmer, which is, when she grabs the cello, it's like a sword. She becomes the Wonder Woman. You can follow her on Twitter at Tina Guo. In terms of discography, she has contributed to a lot of film scores such as Sherlock Holmes, Iron Man 2, Fast 5, X-Men First Class, Inception, and Wonder Woman, just to name a few. She can be heard on several game soundtracks as well. A lot of them happen to be ones that were worked on by Austin Wintory. That includes Journey, Call of Duty Black Ops 2, Assassin's Creed Syndicate, Shadow of the Beast, LEGO Marvel Super Heroes 2, Extinction, Erica, and Cyberpunk 2077 is her latest thing. She is apparently part of that soundtrack as well.
Well, that's timely with that coming out this week.
Yeah, that worked out pretty well. She also has 8 studio albums on her own, so she does good work, and she is a hell of a cellist. In terms of historical development research for Journey's soundtrack, I feel like I found the most information I've ever found on a game's soundtrack in 98 episodes.
I'm glad to hear that, because if there was one soundtrack that should be highlighted as much, it's this one.
So Wintory apparently got the gig because he had previously worked on that game company's previous title, Flow. And before the game had even entered full production, Genova Chen asked Wintory to write what amounted to what he describes as an outline of the score. And during development, this is the most interesting part, I think. During development, he worked very closely with the sound designer and programming team in order to make music that could dynamically change depending on player actions. In fact, and this is a process I don't think we've ever seen, according to Wintory, he would send them the music and then they would prototype the section based on the music he had sent. And then they would send the prototype to him and he would play it and get inspired to add or change up some of the stuff about the song, and he would rewrite it, and that cycle would continue until they felt it was good enough. Something else that really sets Journey apart is that while most game music is defined by having different themes based on each area, Wintory actually wanted to base every piece off of one theme in order to represent the player's journey to the mountaintop. In fact, specifically, the cello are supposed to represent the player themselves. Wintry describes the soundtrack as, quote, a big cello concerto where you are the soloist and the rest of the instruments represent the world around you.
Wow, so it's a good thing that we're mentioning Tina Guo. And yeah, we'll definitely hear in the soundtrack that, like, there is a main leitmotif that goes throughout the piece, and that totally makes sense.
He also describes it as, quote, the cello begins the game as immersed in a sea of electronic sound, before first emerging on its own and then merging into a full orchestra, mirroring the player's journey to the mountain. And apparently the white-robed elders are represented by a bass flute. And something I didn't know, when encountering another player, the score dynamically adds harps and a viola to the song.
I feel like there's also some dynamism based on, are you moving slowly throughout the world, or are you running through, are you being very emotive? Like, I feel like the score also changes based on that.
Yeah, it's a crazy dynamic soundtrack. But I didn't know that thing about the harp and the viola. That's really cool. Wintry even kind of explained it as, like, so if you don't run into anybody, or you only run into somebody sporadically, you're going to get almost an entirely different musical experience from if you are hanging out with somebody throughout the entire game.
That's so cool.
It's so neat. So while the game has relatively clear cultural influences in terms of aesthetic, Wintry wanted to work to make sure that the music for the game sounded, quote, as universal and cultureless as possible. And so he worked hard to remove any overt cultural influences on the score. Also, much like the game is a straight recreation of the hero's journey, most of the tracks are named after specific stages in the hero's journey. Guo herself got involved because she is a close friend of Austin Wintry, and the other non-electronic instruments were recorded by the Macedonia Radio Symphonic Orchestra, which is based out of, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of this, Skopje?
Skopje?
Skopje? Skopje, if you know how to pronounce that. The official release of the soundtrack managed to reach the top 10 of iTunes sales charts for soundtracks in over 20 countries. And it was able to reach number 116 on the Billboard sales charts, which at the time made it the second highest charting game soundtrack. I tried to find what the highest charting one at the time was. Couldn't find it. Don't know what it would be. It was nominated for Best Score Soundtrack for Visual Media at the 2013 Grammys, making it the first video game score to ever be nominated for the category.
There it is. That's why this soundtrack is so revered and well known.
Yes, it did not win. It didn't win the Grammy, but it was nominated, and that's as much. I think only one other game song has been nominated for a Grammy, if I remember correctly, and it's the one from Civ 5, isn't it?
Civ 4 is Baba Yetu, but yeah, that's a song, but this is the score, the whole thing, yeah.
Yeah. So, in January of 2016, Austin Wintry ran a Kickstarter to do a live Journey concert tour where an orchestra would dynamically play the soundtrack as a player on stage worked their way through the game. So basically kind of how Video Games Live does it, sort of.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Sony even provided a special version of the game that allowed the music to be disabled specifically for these concerts. That sounds incredible. I'm sad I never got to see it. All right, I've talked your ear off about the history of this game enough. Let's get into those 5 critical tracks. Oh man, they're so good. We got to start with critical track number 1, Nascence. According to the internet, the word nascence is defined as being born or coming into existence for the first time. This song is the beginning of the journey. This is the leitmotif that you will hear throughout every single song on the soundtrack. You start your adventure in a vast desert with only the mountain in the distance to guide you. And so you get this kind of soft and contemplative piece that really kind of drives home the vastness of the world around you. And like, according to Wintory, this was the easiest song to compose in the entire game. In fact, I believe his exact words were like, my walk to my office from Chen's office was about 10 minutes, and by the time I was there, I already knew what I wanted to write.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's such a good leitmotif. This da 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 da. Like, it's amazing. And I wish I could have played the beginning. As far as the clip goes, the beginning of this piece is solo Tina Guo. Like, when we talk about like the main sort of thrust and melody and performance for the whole game, but honestly, the clip that we use here is like, it's so beautiful. Like how this is kind of near like the end of the piece, and it just builds to this and still uses the same leitmotif. I mean, I was torn for what I wanted to put in here as the clip.
Like I said, it being solo at the beginning is because it's just you. And then the orchestra jumps in when you start being able to see part of the wider world around you. And it's just so cool in game. Mm-hmm. But let's pick up the pace just a little bit for critical track number 2, The Road of Trials. This song is quite literally named after the hero's journey stage, called The Road of Trials, which is defined as, quote, a series of tests that the hero must undergo to begin the transformation.
Basically, the second act building events.
Yes. This is easily my second favorite track in the game. By far. Energy picks up a little bit, because you're like sliding down sand dunes. It's the most fun section of the game, in my opinion. It's the part that I think about the most when I think about Journey. It feels really good. And this song is a big part of why that's the first thing I think about when I think of Journey. It has like this almost whimsical energy to it. Like your character is having fun right now sliding down these dunes. It's so good.
It's so delightful. It does have that energy for sure. And yeah, you're right. Sliding down the dunes is just one of those. It's a feel good moment. It's enjoyable. Yeah, you're having fun, even though it's like the road of trials, and like you're gonna find some difficult moments of the journey. Revel in this one for a bit.
But then we got to tone it down more, because critical track number 3 is Nadir. Nadir is defined as the lowest point in the fortunes of a person or organization, and that is fitting for where this song plays. This is close to the end, but things aren't going well. You are you are so close to the top of the mountain, but it starts to set in that maybe you're not gonna make it. There's cold snow all around you, and your powers are just gone. The wind is pushing you back, and eventually it just gets to the point where you're at your limit. And I think this piece really, really drives home that you are suffering during this section. Like you are dying, yet you gotta keep pushing on. Like it has this determined feel to it, but like has this harshness that you can't really fight. There's nothing you can do about it. All you can do is push on.
I think you nail it perfectly. It's just an oppressive piece, but it goes from highlighting main melodic lines and having instruments be added to just feeling absolutely right. Like you are at your breaking point and the music shows that. The percussion is so heavy, you almost feel like the wind is passing through you. And it's a cacophony in the best way. It's so powerful in game, and it's that tipping point to finally making it.
I remember having a friend of mine play Journey for the first time, and when he hit this part, he audibly said, "No, no," and I've never seen that happen in a game before. I've never seen that happen with something like Journey where there's no dialogue or anything like that, but it's a very powerful moment.
Oh, you care so much to make it to the top of that mountain.
Yeah. And speaking of making it to the top of the mountain, critical track number 4, this is the one, if you know any song in Journey, you know of this song. This is Apotheosis. Once again named after the stage of the hero's journey of the same name, it is defined as, quote, "This is the point of realization in which a greater understanding is achieved." Some versions of the theory put the apotheosis near the end. Joseph Campbell specifically puts it in, like, the middle, in, like, Act 2, which is really weird.
That is strange.
But a lot of, like, future iterations on the theory make this, like, it's the finale, essentially. This was apparently the hardest piece for Wintory to compose. And I want to give a quick shout out. Most of this information actually comes from a Polygon interview with Wintory, specifically just about Apotheosis. So if you want to know more or you want to hear it from Austin's mouth himself, go watch that video. It's great. So apparently the original version incorporated a choir to give the ending a very surreal feeling. But when he put it in the game, he was like, this is really boring. It turns out to be crazily boring and not super satisfying for the moment that you've been building up to the entire game. So he then tried something much faster and aggressive, and then found that this was kind of tonally dissonant with the rest of the game and the moment itself. Because, as he put it, he actually described it as it sounded like something out of Fast and the Furious. And this video actually has samples of both of these original drafts of Apotheosis, which is really neat.
Oh, wow. I gotta see that.
When it turned out that he wasn't making any progress, he did something that he hadn't done for any other piece in the game, in that he turned the game off. And he stopped playing the prototypes, and he just started thinking on his own. And the first thing that came to mind for him, I don't think they're really that legible in the clip, but at the beginning of this piece, there's these dun 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 dun. That was apparently the first place that he came. And then he just added on from there, and the really slow leitmotif that you hear throughout the game, which you do hear in the clip, it's just all built out from there. Apparently part of his inspiration for this was the scene from WALL-E, where Wally and Eve are outside the spaceship and Wally's using a fire extinguisher to fly. But then a new problem emerged, being that neither Wintory nor the devs knew how to end the song or the game. They had no idea. They wanted to do this big dramatic ending, but they still wanted it to feel emotional, and they just didn't know how to really accomplish this. But then Austin was invited to come conduct a concert performance, a sort of preview performance of Journey's music called Woven Variations that goes for about 8 minutes. And at the end of Apotheosis, Wintory had the rest of the orchestra just sort of fade back And then at the end, it was just Tina Guo's solo. And apparently the devs were sitting in the audience during this performance, and it inspired them to make that the ending. The game world simply fades away, and the player is alone with their thoughts. And I think that is a really, really cool sort of story for this one piece.
You're right. It's the one. It's the piece. And this is one where you please listen to the whole thing. It's so good. Mm-hmm. Maybe it'll take you back to your journey experiences if you've played the game. But it's so satisfying in the moment. And that's really neat to hear about how the ending came about, because it's perfect the way it worked out.
And let's wrap it up with critical track number 5. I Was Born for This. This is the credits theme, vocals by Lisbeth Scott. It is a gorgeous piece that really, really works perfectly with the emotions that you're probably feeling upon setting your controller down for the end of the game. I did learn something neat, being that the lyrics in this song are apparently made up of various quotes in various languages and literary passages from around the world, including quotes from Joan of Arc, Beowulf, a Matsuo Basho haiku, the Aeneid, and the Iliad.
The vocals in the credits are the perfect end cap. I feel like, yeah, if they wanted to add vocals, the credits are where you put it. As the player is kind of just, dealing with the feelings of the game. It works so well. This fights with Apotheosis for me from my favorite. Some days I like one more than the other. But sometimes they're done well in tandem. It's kind of a collaborative, conjoined experience, I think, because one flows right into the other.
Yeah, it's so good. It's such a good ender and such a good ending, and Journey's so good. So, Peter, you got a couple songs on the cutting room floor. Hit me.
I do have a couple songs on the cutting room floor. Not that they stand out or I feel like I had to include them. I just want to cover more tracks from this game, honestly, because it's been a long time coming and it's been so worth it. So may not have much to say on them, but the first of these is The Call. You have noted here that the hero's journey notes the call to adventure, that point in the narrative where the hero feels like they have to leave their space of comfort to make that big journey. And this really highlights it. I don't know, it's just a really nice piece. I feel like these two both are just like, I don't have like the deepest fondness connection, but just please enjoy it.
Yeah, it's very good, and it's yet another great example of the leitmotif that you hear throughout the game.
Highlighted more with violin, but when you're looking toward that mountain with some aspiration, it highlights it, and it's almost like, the wind's kind of rustling in your ears a little bit.
So actually, I think it's cello, and here's why I'm saying that.
Interesting.
Apparently, he asked, according to the video from Polygon, and that might not be the case with this song, but it was at least in some of the pieces that he wrote for Journey, he asked Guo to try playing the cello at a higher octave than you would expect of a cello, and she was able to do it.
Well, there you go. It almost sounds violin-like, but of course. If the cello is representative of the player, then of course it is. Wow. See, you'll always learn something new here. Other piece on the cutting room floor for me is Reclamation. just another gorgeous piece. I mean, wow. Another step in the hero's journey. I like this one because it kind of shows you snippets of highlighting that harp. So again, like, hopefully you had someone accompany you on the journey so that you could hear the harp added beautifully to the orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, I think the two on the cutting room floor that you have are better representative of like the encompassing game experience and like had to be here if only just missing the critical 5. But you can't go wrong with adding more songs for Journey on the cutting room floor. So I'm happy to add these two.
Oh yeah, every song on the soundtrack is a winner. Every single one. For my 2 cutting room floor tracks, the first one is Threshold. This is named after the part of the hero's journey that is titled Crossing of the Return Threshold, which essentially just means you've hit a point where there is no turning back now. And it's just this very nice flute piece. Mm-hmm. It's good. I like it a lot. It's fun. And it's again, the same leitmotif from the whole game, but just a different flavor of it, sort of.
Yeah, and a little whimsy to it. Love hearing this little passage. I'm glad you included it, because if you weren't going to, I was.
But then my second cutting room floor track is a little bit of a different mood. It's Descent. Some versions of the monomyth theory have a stage called Descent into the Underworld, which I am going to assume is what this piece is named after. I assume mainly based on the Odyssey, where Odysseus literally walks into Hades and talks to Achilles and then leaves because he's Odysseus. And this happens during a part where, like, things have gotten a little bit more scary and threatening all of a sudden. Big snake things that aren't happy that you are around have shown up. And it's just a tone shift suddenly, but not a bad one, like a very good tone shift. And I really like this piece and that part.
Shows the darkness of the journey. Always good to highlight the whimsy and the shadow as well.
So what will I never forget about Journey? I think it's one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever had in a video game. Bar none. I still think it's one of the prettiest games ever made, even though it came out in 2012. When I get a PS5, I think one of the first games I'm going to play on it is the PS4 version of Journey. Because I think that sounds awesome. That sounds so good. I can't believe that there's not just like an official PS5 port, but it doesn't sound like Sony really has publishing rights of the game anymore. So who knows? I think that Journey is a near perfect video game. There's no part of it that I think is outright bad. And it is one of my favorite quote unquote casual games of all time. Like that word is sometimes used very derogatory, but it's not, it's a game anybody could play. Anybody could pick up Journey and be able to play it. If you haven't played it, you should get on that as soon as possible.
I think Journey is up there in the case study of are games art? Journey is art. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Journey is art.
It's phenomenal. It is visually stunning. The soundtrack, obviously, finally bringing it to the show. But narratively, just how you're right. Anyone can pick up and play it and enjoy it. It is a game that I'm surprised doesn't get more mention as it goes on in years. But I think anyone who had a Journey experience always looks back on it fondly.
Yeah, I know I sure do.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's why I'm reticent to try it again, because mine was so fantastic to have the primary one player guide me through. It was amazing.
I mean, it might be a good game to throw at your girlfriend, honestly.
Entirely possible. I've been thinking about that throughout this whole section, to be honest.
And I almost replayed it. If I would have had time, I was going to replay it before we did the episode.
Yeah.
But I didn't end up having time. So, all right. So to transition from Journey into a world where you have to think a little bit harder, we are going to highlight a fan cover by a YouTuber named Taylor Davis, which was also actually highlighted in the Polygon video. I found this before I watched the Polygon video. I do want to say that. But I was surprised to see it actually highlighted in it. She did a Journey medley, which is made up of both Apotheosis and I Was Born for This. It's so good. It's done on violin. It is great. So please enjoy that, and we will be right back.
From the beautiful adventure that is Journey, we now transition to the puzzling humor of an adventure that is Portal 2. Again, another game that has been far too long for us not to bring up on this show, and what a one to pair Journey with, I think. But let's first talk about Portal. Portal was an experimental game that was released in the compilation of games known as the Orange Box in 2007. Portal from there became an internet culture phenomenon. Whether you've heard of Aperture Science, the thought of thinking with portals, the song that is still alive, and most of all, the cake is a lie.
Which is now a good test to tell, a good litmus test to tell if somebody has ever told an original joke in their entire life.
True. It did become a little oversaturated, but it did show the relevance and importance that Portal had in 2007. And so, obviously, a sequel had to be made by Valve. And so Portal 2 was released on April 19th, 2011 in North America on PC, Xbox 360, and PlayStation 3. PAL Regions got the game on April 21st of 2011. It's developed and published by Valve. Portal is a first-person puzzle adventure game. Much like the original Portal, players solve puzzles by placing two portals and essentially teleporting between them. You place an in point, you place an out point, you walk in one, you come out the other. But the idea is that momentum is carried over from in one portal and out the other. So if you jump from a high point and fall into a portal that's on the floor, you're going to be flung out of that other portal at that speed, at that momentum that you were falling at that point. So you basically think of these 3D spaces that you're placed in, and how do I get to that end door? Well, let's see the environment. Where can I place portals and use the environment to my advantage to get to that ultimate end point? And so you have test chambers like this, and a story that goes throughout. Portal 2 adds features including tractor beams, lasers, light bridges, and paint-like gels that alter player movement, or they could allow portals to be placed on any surface. The story of Portal 2, because there are two campaigns. There is a single-player campaign, and then there is a co-op campaign. In the single-player story, the player character Chell wakes in a stasis chamber resembling a motel room, only to discover that she has actually been dragged back into the Aperture Science facility years after her initial escape. And the complex is now dilapidated. It's on the verge of collapse. Wheatley, a floating robot orb and what's known as a personality core, guides Chell through old test chambers in an attempt to escape. They accidentally reactivate the dormant GLaDOS, who is the first game's AI antagonist, who then separates Chell from Wheatley and begins rebuilding the laboratory. Meanwhile, after the events of the single-player campaign, the robots Atlas and Peabody help GLaDOS test new chambers. So, the point, at least of the single-player story, is what are the secrets of Aperture Science, specifically in regards to its founder, Cave Johnson, and can Chell escape again? Joe, here's where I'll ask you, what are our experiences with Portal 2?
I adore Portal 2. It is, and this might be a hot take, the best game that Valve ever released.
Yep, I would agree with that.
Bar none, no competition. Yeah, sorry Half-Life 2, it's Portal 2. I love the original Portal as well, but Portal 2 is just more and great, and it's also the last... Well, I guess Half-Life Alyx finally, but for a long time, it was basically the last super great game that Valve released. It's so good, and just the prep for this episode, and also, 2 nights ago, I was watching 2 VTubers play co-op in Portal 2, which, by the way, I'm very happy that I only played co-op once, because otherwise I would not have been able to watch that stream. Have you ever watched somebody play Portal when you've already played Portal?
Oh, that's gotta be rough. I haven't, but that sounds brutal.
It is the most maddening thing. I don't have that reaction with any other game in the world, but I want to pull my hair out after 2 chambers. It's painful, but it's just super good, and I kind of want to replay Portal 2 and Portal. Oh man, I want to play both of those again now. I bought it on PC when it first came out, and then I ended up buying it on PS3 as well, I'm pretty sure. So I own Portal 2 twice, actually.
Yeah, I own it twice as well. I played the single-player campaign on PlayStation 3, but then it was so easy to get on PC. It goes on sale super cheap because it's a Valve game all the time. So, I mean, if you have it on PC, I mean, that's probably really the place to play it. But playing it on PS3 was interesting. I will say that. What a game, though. You're right. I think it is Valve's best game. And for a long time, it was their last single-player offering. But it's such a harmonious marriage of gameplay, of writing, of atmosphere, and just the smarts that it takes to complete it, and the epiphanies that players have, and how good you feel about yourself for completing these puzzles, and all of the new things that Portal 2 adds, not only in gameplay with the different gels and things like that, but wow, the addition and expansion of the narrative with the Cave Johnson backstory. It's such a fabulous, fabulous game. It was interesting to learn about Portal 2, though, because after the release of Portal and how successful it was, work on Portal 2 began immediately. While Portal had a team of 7 or 8 people, Portal 2 had a team of 30 or 40 people. And initially, Valve planned to exclude portals from Portal 2. Did not know this. This was really interesting to learn. For about 5 months, they focused on a gameplay mechanic called f-stop. And if you know that, that is a camera terminology. F-stop apparently remained a secret until 2020, when an indie developer mentioned that they were using the same kind of mechanic that Valve had planned. See, what f-stop was supposed to be for the original concept of Portal 2 was it was based on an aperture camera. Aperture, f-stop, again, all camera terms. This aperture camera gave users the ability to take photos of objects. Then they could store that object in a camera and then replace it while rotating or scaling it.
Can I guess what game brought out this information?
It sounds a lot like Superliminal, but I don't think it was that.
That's what I'm thinking too. Huh. Yeah, I the instant you said that, I was like, is that Superliminal?
Yeah, I would agree with you, but apparently it was from developer Lunch House Software for their game Exposure.
Huh.
So, but yeah, it sounds a lot like Superliminal, right? No. But yeah, so this f-stop game from Valve would have been set in the 1950s, and it would have followed a new test subject involved in a conflict within Aperture after Cave Johnson, in an attempt to reach immortality, uploaded himself into an artificial intelligence and took control of a robot army. Now, players who tested this early build liked the idea of f-stop, but then they were like, where's Chell? Where's GLaDOS? Where are portals? So Valve kind of stepped back and they're like, okay, we'll put portals in Portal 2, I guess.
If you're gonna twist our arms.
The idea for the gels in Portal 2, we may have mentioned this on a past episode before. It sounded kind of familiar, but it came from the game Tag the Power of Paint, which was a student-winning award game at the Independent Games Festival in 2009. As a result, Valve then hired the game's creators and they're like, let's put this paint mechanic into Portal 2. One of these paints was you could bounce off it and essentially jump. One of these was that you could run on it and gain higher speed. The third one in Tag the Power of Paint allowed players to walk on any surface regardless of gravity. This gave playtesters motion sickness. What a surprise.
Who would have thought?
Yeah, so they then replaced it with the ability for the gel to go on any kind of wall, and then you could make portals on that gel. The cooperative mode in Portal 2 originated from players' requests and from anecdotes of players working together on the same computer or console to solve the game's puzzles. So while there aren't timed puzzles in the single-player campaign, they were included in the co-op campaign because you had more players, more brain power, and you could have voice chat between the two players, and with coordination and communication, those challenges could be overcome. But the story in the co-op campaign was really stripped down to just simple, basic ideas because Valve didn't want players talking over a complex plot. And so it's two robots helping GLaDOS test chambers, and it's fun. It's great. It's a fantastic example of whether it's local or online co-op, both work splendidly. The game has 13,000 lines of dialogue. It is a story-heavy, meaty game on the dialogue front as you're doing all these chambers and working your way through the Aperture Science facility. Ellen McLean returns as GLaDOS, Stephen Merchant plays Wheatley, and J.K. Simmons is Cave Johnson, one of my favorite actors. He's so good in that role.
He's incredibly good in that role. He's good in every role, but
yes,
that's one of the ones I mainly think about J.K. Simmons for now. That and J. Jonah Jameson, those are the two.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The writers considered introducing about 6 personality cores stored in portable spheres, with personalities ranging from Morgan Freeman's character Red from The Shawshank Redemption and Quint from Jaws, and these would have been like story progression checkpoints, like there would have been one for like each part of the game, but ultimately they just focused on Wheatley, and I think this was really strong. It made Wheatley a much better character. Now, Stephen Merchant was the first choice from Valve to play Wheatley, but they had a backup planned in case Merchant was too busy to sign on to the project, and that was Richard Ayoade from the IT crowd. So, yeah, having Moss's personality, or at least that kind of dry, sardonic humor, I think could have worked really well, but I'm really glad they got Stephen Merchant. That's a really, really good pick. Portal 2 was officially announced on March 5th, 2010 from Game Informer, and Valve had spent the days leading up to the announcement with teases through alternate reality games and also patches in the original Portal with a new achievement and also a new cutscene in the ending featuring Chell being pulled back into Aperture. The game made waves at E3 2010 in the middle of the year there, with Valve CEO Gabe Newell's appearance on stage at the Sony press conference to announce that Portal 2 was coming to PlayStation 3. After Gabe Newell had talked a lot of smack about the PlayStation 3. So it was quite a newsworthy story, made a lot of waves.
I think it was one of the first games to do crossplay because PS3 players could play with PC players in co-op.
You're right. Yeah.
Because when me and Ben played Portal 2 co-op way back in the day, I was on a PS3 and he was on a PC, and that's how we did it. I can't think of a game that did it before that. Now, like, that's a little more commonplace, but yeah, that's notable.
That's a really good point. Yeah, thanks you for mentioning that. It was a thing at the time for sure. I think that may even be how my brother and I played co-op. That's a really good point. So when the game did come out, it was reviewed exceptionally well. Portal 2 has a Metacritic score of 95. It was praised for its gameplay, its balanced learning curve, its pacing, its dark humor, writing, and acting. Some players took issue with a difficulty spike in the game's second act. They weren't too sure where to go. There was also just the sterile walls of Aperture Science, and there were some issues with loading times, but ultimately these were all trifles for a fantastic game experience. As of May 2012, the game sold more than 4 million units. Steam Spy estimates today that between 10 to 20 million players have Portal 2 in their Steam libraries. And that's just on Steam. I mean, gosh, when you talk about the 360 and PS3 versions, that's probably even more there. It was a highly awarded game, much like Journey. It had 12 nominations at the Spike Video Game Awards with 5 wins, 10 nominations at the Interactive Achievement Awards, which are now the DICE Awards, with 3 wins there, 6 nominations at the BAFTAs with 3 wins, including Best Game. Outlets like Gamasutra, Eurogamer, and the Associated Press named Portal 2 as Game of the Year. And the score for the music and the performances, those were really the things that were especially lauded amongst Portal 2's award wins. Beyond the initial launch, there was a peer review DLC campaign that extended the included co-op campaign, as well as a level editor, and there was also in-motion content that added content for motion controllers like PlayStation Move and Razer Hydra on PC. Portal 2 content integration, things got added into games like Bastion, Skyrim, LEGO Dimensions, and more. There was the Teach with Portals program that gave teachers in classrooms the ability to, here's Portal 2, have your kids learn by playing Portal 2 for free. Also, there's a character at the end of the game called the Space Corps. And one of the big memes of the game was this little circle being like, space, want to go to space, space. Voiced by Nolan North, which that's always one of those weird little things where it's like, he tells the story of how he was just recording for this thing and even had no idea that he was cast in it until people were like, is this you? He's like, oh, I did that randomly. I didn't know it was going to become anything. So this character of the Space Corps also has appeared as a laser-based engraving on a panel manufactured by NASA for the International Space Station. So the Space Corps got to go to space.
Yay! Good for him.
But seriously, when we're talking about the game's legacy, Valve, where's Portal 3?
Even more than that, hey, Valve, where's the HD re-release of Portal and Portal 2?
Yeah.
It has never been released on consoles outside of, like, the PS3 and 360. It never moved forward. Come on, guys.
Like a 4K, sort of patch with higher textures, that game would sing. It's gorgeous for a 2011 game. I mean, my goodness, wow.
I'm also pretty sure Portal and Portal 2, Portal for sure, Portal 2 maybe a bit more iffy, could probably run on the Switch.
Oh, probably. Yeah, no, I'd see that for sure. Oh, that'd be a great game to take on the go. To take portably, even.
Yeah, portable Portal. Ah.
When it comes to the composer for Portal 2, we're talking about Mike Morasky. Mike Morasky was born on June 14th, 1964 in Detroit, Michigan. I wish they gave more specifics. If he wasn't born in like the city, just knowing a little locally, like I'm curious, like, was it actually Detroit or was it somewhere in the metro area? I think no quote sums his career up better than what was on his website, saying, quote, Morasky's life and career sounds a lot like one of the postmodern audio collages he is so fond of creating. Teenage guitar player in a bar band in Montana, award-winning experimental composer in Tokyo, audio hardware programmer in Silicon Valley, underground art rocker touring the world, 3D animator and director for television, electronic audio collage artist in France and Japan, visual effects artist on the Lord of the Rings and Matrix trilogies, AI animation instructor at an art college. These days, Mike is doing some combination of all of these things at Valve. Yeah, he was like a senior FX lead on the Lord of the Rings trilogy and the last two Matrix movies with Reloaded and Revolutions. Like, he's got papers talking about like the animations of the Sentinel Horde.
That's a lot of stuff. And it's also like, until Alex came out, I look at the people that work at Valve and I'm like, what do you do? Like, what do you do? What do you do? Valve doesn't make games. What are you doing?
But apparently there's a lot of skills there. So as he mentioned with those underground art rock bands, some of them include Steel Pole Bathtub, Milk Cult, Tumor Circus, and Duh.
All 4 award-winning names that I applaud with all my heart.
I thought they were fantastic too. You can follow him on Twitter at Mike Morasky. His discography for video games, for composition, a lot of Valve projects, including Team Fortress 2, Portal, Left 4 Dead 2, Alien Swarm, Portal 2, Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and, yes, the release this year, Half-Life Alyx. I couldn't find too much as far as like Portal 2 information on the soundtrack, but I found it interesting that with the official soundtrack called Songs to Test By, Morasky is credited as Aperture Science Psychoacoustics Laboratories, or at least the head of that department. That's fitting in universe, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Also, it was free on Valve's website for a really long time. They put up the whole thing for free. That's how I got it, at least.
That is really neat, for sure. So let's talk about the music from Portal 2 and all of its electronic synth-heavy nature. Let's start on the 5 critical tracks here with 9999999. I feel like this is a pretty good example of like early on in Portal 2 before things get too crazy. This plays on the main menu screen, but also when Chell approaches the central AI chamber. Not just before you approach Reawakening GLaDOS, but just before then. It's a piece that starts really quietly, and even in the clip, some instruments have already been added, but it builds really well, and you hear the transition in the clip from kind of what the slower bit sounds like to the more energetic mechanical driving bit there. So just a really neat piece, and I feel like one of the calmer pieces in a way on the Critical 5 here. But it's important to note that when Portal 2 has these higher paced frenetic moments on its soundtrack, there are also these kind of more atmospheric, ethereal, sort of synth atmosphere sounds.
Yeah, and for anybody wondering why it is called that, is a joke from the first scene when this plays, I believe, which is them telling you how long you have been in stasis, and it's just it repeating 9 over and over and over before breaking.
Mm-hmm.
So I always find that kind of funny. Yeah, this is up there. This is one of the better songs on the soundtrack. I think this fits perfectly well.
But yeah, I think just a good example before things get crazy. It's kind of setting the tone for being back at Aperture Science. Number 2 on the Critical 5, we're going to ramp it up a little bit here. And actually, a lot of these are endgame stuff, but they're so important to the Portal 2 experience. So number 2 on the Critical 5 here, this is Reconstructing More Science. So for me, this track represents Portal 2's sound as a whole. This is usually the one I think of most, to be honest. And I think, like, what am I writing down immediately in the Critical 5? This song. It plays in various trailers for the game, but I guess also while using the propulsion gel in the final level during the final battle. So I put it, later in the list? Sure, I suppose. But for me, this is what I think of whenever I think of Portal 2's soundtrack. The kind of synths at the beginning before it drops this heavy sort of backing to it. The relentless pace of when that kicks in is so Portal 2. And then especially when the higher these like kind of higher synths come in a little bit. Everything about this song is, yes, Portal 2.
Yeah, when I think of like the sort of melody of this song, the that's the melody I think of when I think of Portal. Like that's the Portal leitmotif, I guess. It's very, very good. This is definitely, I think I remember the trailer that this plays in the most.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause it was, I think, the second trailer. It might have been the launch trailer, but I don't remember. But it was played in one of the later trailers, and it's such a good trailer, and it's such a good song. Oh, man.
It's one of the definitive tracks on this soundtrack for sure. But number 3 on the Critical 5 is a great moment from the game. This is the part where he kills you. So in Chapter 9, the final chapter, it starts as the part where he kills you. This is the part where he kills you. And on the screen it says Chapter 9, the part where he kills you. And then you get an achievement pop. It says the part where he kills you.
And then Wheatley says, this is the part where I kill you. And GLaDOS says, this is the part where he kills us.
It's fantastic. And yeah, what a piece to go with it. Like the driving, it's not horns in the background, but like you're feeling like the energy is like you need to run. Like run, he's gonna kill us. We gotta escape. And it's a great piece. It's a great moment in the game. And I feel like it would be remiss if I did not include this one in here.
And that deep sort of synth, the one that's sort of like the dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
That's kind of Wheatley's leitmotif for like the latter half of the game.
Right. Yeah. So not to be like spoilers or anything, but like when that twist comes, and what part is he talking about when he kills you? You're right. That kind of, it's like a blaring horn, almost like a deep siren, like an alarm note. That's definitely a Wheatley leitmotif for sure. But as the game ends, we've got a couple special tracks here to wrap up the Critical 5. Number 4 here is Cara Mia Addio. In case you didn't know, Ellen McLean is an opera singer, and I'm so glad they finally got to put those talents on display here, as you're in an elevator ride to the surface from Aperture Science, and you're seeing these turrets, these little enemies that you've been dispatching some throughout the game. They suddenly decide to sing this Italian opera song. And it's beautiful. It's just a nice little levity, calm moment after the frenetic pace of a final battle. And yeah, wow, it's a powerful musical moment.
I get emotional when I get to this part of the game, which is really funny. I don't get emotional during any other part of Portal at all, because it's a comedy game through and through. But this part, I also think it's the first time in either game where they actually refer to Chell by name, because I think they say her name in the lyrics. It's hard to tell because it might just be an Italian word, but I'm pretty sure they call her Chell. And yeah, it's just a really unexpected thing. I still remember where I was when I saw this the first time. It was my senior year, and I was playing it in the library during a class that I was the quote-unquote teacher's aide for. But that teacher didn't have any work for me to do, so I mainly just sat and watched anime and played video games in the back of her classroom. But yeah, we were in the library, and I was finishing up Portal 2 on my laptop, and yeah, I got emotional in the middle of a high school library over robots.
Wow. Yeah, no, it's a powerful moment for sure. Like, there's still some beauty in the world, even if robots are conveying it. And then finally, of course, this wraps up the Critical 5. It's the credits theme. This is Want You Gone.
One day they woke me up so I could live forever. It's such a shame the same will never happen to you. You got your short sad life left. That's what I'm counting on. I'll let you get right to it now. I only want you gone.
The only song on the soundtrack not composed by Mike Morasky. This is, of course, written by Jonathan Colton after Colton wrote Still Alive for Portal. Tried to bring him back for another credits theme for Portal 2. Is it as good as Still Alive? I kind of like it better, but I think most people on the whole will say that Still Alive was more effective, more memorable. Say what you will. But great humor in the lyrics. I really like this song, and the harmonies too. Wow. It's just a nice kind of cleansing feeling to be through with the adventure and have a nice humorous song to go along with it for the game's credits.
I also think I like this song more than Still Alive. I think I agree that Still Alive is more well-known, more quote-unquote memorable, but this song kind of reflects one of my favorite things about Portal 2, which is GLaDOS, and how she gets to be a character in this game. Like, in Portal 1, yeah, she's a character, but she's also just sort of this robot voice, and she's trying Ella McLean was obviously directed to, no, you gotta sound like a robot. And in Portal 2, like, she is so done with all of your crap, and they like took the limiters off of Ella McLean, and she does such a great performance. And even in this song, that kind of reflects that too. Like, it's less like it was put in through a synthesizer and more like there is something with a personality singing it. And it's so good.
Between her and Stephen Merchant as Wheatley, and you can't forget J.K. Simmons as Cave Johnson, but McLean and Merchant were really the front runners for performance awards at Game Awards that year for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to tracks on the cutting room floor, Joe, you have 2. Hit me with them.
My first one is kind of weird because we learned that it is used in trailers, but it's not actually in the game, which is a bummer, so it can't go on the Critical 5. But I love this song, and I'm going to talk about it. It's Science is Fun. This is my favorite song on the soundtrack. Well, it goes back and forth with this and one of the songs on Your Cutting Room Floor, actually. I love this song. It is so cool. It is so Portal, and it just feels great. And it's a shame that it is not actually in the game, because otherwise this was part of your Critical 5, actually.
It was originally. I feel like it's a track that, again, when we're talking like clearly identifiably Portal 2, it's definitely this. The synths may be a little unrelenting, but that's kind of part of the song's charm. Like, that's what you're signing up for here at Aperture Science.
Yeah, I absolutely love this song. It's so good. And my second song on the cutting room floor is Wheatley Science. This plays in the fourth main menu screen. There are multiple main menu screens depending on how far you get in the game. I didn't know this because I've never not beaten it in one go. So there's that. Or at least I haven't beaten it not in one go in a real long time, because it's not as short as the original Portal, but it still ain't a long game. I love this song because it's really aggressive and it's sinister, and it has this thing where you feel like you're rubbing up against the finale. And it's, again, that sort of Wheatley leitmotif with the dun, 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 dun.
Yeah.
It's super good.
Absolutely. I feel like listening to this one, it was just like, oh, it's real similar to the part where he kills you. And it's almost like setting up that kind of, that leitmotif for sure. That's a really good point.
Mm-hmm.
My two, one of them is Bombs for Throwing at You. Great title. This is the final boss battle against Wheatley. So you're really in a frenetic kind of pace with this one. Just a lot of crazy intense rhythm. But then, yeah, again, the high-pitched synth comes in, and like that's another Portal 2 staple. But yeah, you've got a big intensity for this piece for the final battle, at least starting out. And it's just a great piece overall.
This is the song that fights for Science with Science is Fun for my favorite song of the game. I adore Bombs for Throwing at You. And I also love the song that comes right after it, which is the Your Precious Moon. I think the last four tracks in the game, being Bombs for Throwing at You, Your Precious Moon, Cara Mia Adio, and Want You Gone, are like a combo of some of the best pieces in the entirety of Portal 2.
Just the whole end chapter, it's a masterclass. It's amazing. I mean, yeah, you talk about the moon, talk about an incredible moment. I mean, wow, so good. Just a great end game. Wow. And then for a fun, happy song, the other one on the cutting room floor for me is Robots for the Win. Or I guess Robots FTW, if we're being very specific. This plays during the end credits of the co-op mode. And so it makes sense if you're kind of celebrating victory as two robots that you completed the co-op together. I feel like this is a piece that sometimes gets used in like YouTube videos, and you hear its little da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, like the little happy, chippy sound, but then also the longer, drawn-out synth melody. And like you think, like, what is this from? It's Portal 2's co-op credits. It's just a great song.
This song gets grating after a little while.
Sure.
The higher pitched synths are a little much for me. I don't hate the song, but I wouldn't count it among my favorites.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. But I don't know. It's a fun one where I think some people may know it, and it's like, no, it's from Portal 2. What will I never forget about the game? I am someone who was pretty late on the Portal bandwagon. I think I only played it like right before I was going to play Portal 2. And wow, I mean, what a series of games back to back. To see how much they expanded on Portal 2. Cave Johnson's, overall character, bringing that out. J.K. Simmons' performance. lemons. This line about lemons. I mean,
I used to have a shirt that said that.
I mean, it's just a very memorable game. And you know what? We're talking about games I need to introduce my girlfriend to. We haven't tackled the whole first person perspective of games yet, but I feel like Portal, the original Portal, may be a good one for introducing that.
I think that would probably be, I think that's probably a pretty alright choice on that. I don't know. I want to replay Portal now, and Portal 2. I want to replay both of them. Like, I might actually go do that the instant we're done recording.
That'd be great. I really need to do that as well sometime. It's been a while. Well, when it comes to games about PS3 surprises, I mean, that crossplay and being on PS3 for Portal 2 and the masterpiece that is Journey on PlayStation 3. I'm so glad that we finally got to talk about these soundtracks. So long overdue, but you know what? So great to talk about it. And I think, honestly, one of our better episodes that we've done.
Mm-hmm. I think this one's going to go down as one of our best. And I could tell it was going to be one of our best before we even started recording, just looking at this outline. Just like, oh man, it's going to be good.
Also, these tracks, though, I mean, it's amazing, amazing soundtracks. So that will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at PeteSpeakEasy. Joe is over at the Dobaga. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, but you really want that MP3 podcast version. That's at Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. Get that MP3 podcast version along with Joe's other podcasts, Masterpieces, on podcast services around the globe, wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify. Not only do we have a Spotify podcast feed with all of our main episodes and bonus episodes, but we have a Spotify playlist where if a video game song that we talk about on the show is on Spotify, it's going on that big playlist. Joe, anything being added to the list this week?
So Portal 2 is on Spotify. Journey used to be, but it was taken off. I don't understand why, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel because Austin Wintory actually tweeted like 2 days ago that it is coming back, so.
And that is very good to hear, because both should be added to the playlist. I mean, that's fantastic. We also have a merch store. Go get your merch for Original Sound Chat and Masterpieces for the holiday season. Joe, where's that at?
You can find that at teespring.com/stores/anonymous-dinosaur. You got t-shirts, you got mugs. We've already sold a little bit of stuff. And some people have already received their stuff, and it's really cool to see that. And thank you all for supporting us. And if you want to support us, hey, there's a shop.
Put pet hoodies back on the store, though, Teespring. What the heck?
Yeah, I'm sad because I was actually on my way to go buy 2 of them when I found out they were discontinued.
Oh man, that is unfortunate. But yeah, we're also working on bonus tracks, but gosh, it's honestly building up to that end of the year. This coming week, we are finalizing our best of 2020 list, and it's a doozy. It's going to be crazy.
Yeah, we have been working super hard, basically around the clock, to make sure we have everything we need to finalize the whole thing. It's a lot.
It is a lot. Should be nuts, but it keeps getting better though, because Joe, who are we talking about next week?
Well, next week is, on my end, yet another one of those "how did it take us so long" composers, because I will be talking about David Wise.
I will be talking about Ichiro Shimakura. I did not know this name, but wow, the soundtrack is real good. Real excited for this episode. So to play us out, talking about a fan cover on YouTube, OC Remix, wherever, brought one of your favorite YouTube channels, the 8-Bit Big Band, to the stage here. And they did a cover of Want You Gone in a Frank Sinatra lounge singer style. It sounds so good. I highly recommend the full listen, but here you go. Please enjoy. Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Sound Chat. We'll see you next time. Take care.